The National Electrical Code, specifically Section 230.70 AON, addresses the height requirements for the main disconnect of a service panel in residential applications. This code section is crucial for ensuring accessibility and safety when operating or servicing the main disconnect. The NEC states that the main service disconnecting means shall be installed at a readily accessible location either outside of a building or structure or inside nearest the point of entrance of the service conductors. The height of the disconnecting means must be such that it is readily accessible to qualified personnel. The specific language in the NEC indicates the disconnecting means must be installed so that the center of the operating handle of the disconnecting means, when in its highest position, is not more than 6 feet 7 inches above the floor or working platform. This requirement ensures that the disconnect can be easily reached by someone standing on the floor. There is also a requirement that the disconnecting means must not be installed less than 2 feet above the floor or working platform, unless specific exceptions apply. This low limit helps prevent accidental contact and ensures that the disconnect is not located too close to the ground where it could be exposed to moisture or damage. Several factors influence the exact placement of the main disconnect within these height limits. Firstly, consider the physical layout of the service entrance. The disconnect should be located as close as possible to the point where the service conductors enter the building to minimize the length of unprotected conductors inside the structure. Secondly, accessibility is key. The disconnect should be in a location that is easily reached without requiring the use of ladders or other equipment. Thirdly, the working space around the disconnect must comply with NEC 110.26, which specifies minimum clearances for working around electrical equipment. The International Building Code, IC Section 2603.11, may also provide additional guidance related to the installation of electrical equipment and systems in buildings, but it is primarily concerned with structural aspects and fire safety. The NEC is the primary standard for electrical installations. The National Fire Protection Association NFPA 70 National Electrical Code Handbook provides detailed explanations and examples to help understand the requirements of the NEC. This handbook can be a valuable resource for electrical contractors, inspectors, and homeowners. AEE Standard 1100, Recommended Practice for Powering and Grounding Electronic Equipment, deals with grounding and power quality issues but does not directly address the height requirements for the main disconnects. It focuses on ensuring reliable and safe operation of electronic equipment by providing guidance on grounding techniques and power distribution systems. Consider a typical residential scenario. The service conductors enter the building through an exterior wall in the basement. The main disconnect must be located on the interior side of that wall. The operating handle of the disconnect should be no higher than 6 feet 7 inches from the floor and no lower than 2 feet from the floor. This placement ensures that the homeowner or qualified personnel can easily access the disconnect in case of an emergency or for maintenance purposes. Now consider an installation in a residence with a raised foundation. If the service entrance is located on the exterior wall of the crawl space, the same height requirements apply. The disconnect must be accessible from the floor of the crawl space, with the operating handle within the specified height range. If the crawl space is not readily accessible or does not provide adequate working space, the disconnect may need to be located elsewhere, such as on the exterior of the building or in a more accessible area inside. In a multi-family dwelling, such as an apartment building, the NEC requires that each occupant have access to their service disconnecting means. This means that each apartment unit must have its own disconnect located either inside the unit or in a readily accessible location outside the unit. The height requirements for these disconnects are the same as for single-family dwellings. The working space around the disconnect must be sufficient to allow safe operation and maintenance. NEC 110.26 specifies minimum clearances for working around electrical equipment, including service disconnects. These clearances depend on the voltage of the system and the configuration of the equipment. For example, for systems operating at 120 volts to ground, the minimum clear distance in front of the equipment is typically 3 feet. For systems operating at higher voltages, the minimum clear distance may be greater. The width of the working space must be at least 30 inches wide, or the width of the equipment, whichever is greater. The depth of the working space must be sufficient to allow safe operation and maintenance. In addition to the height requirements, the NEC also specifies requirements for the location and identification of service disconnects. The disconnect must be located in a readily accessible location, either outside of the building or inside nearest the point of entrance of the service conductors. The disconnect must be clearly labeled to indicate its purpose. The labeling should be durable and easy to read. In summary, when installing a main disconnect for a residential service panel, it is essential to adhere to the height requirement specified in NEC section 230.70 on. The operating handle of the disconnect must be no higher than 6 feet 7 inches from the floor and no lower than 2 feet from the floor. The disconnect must be located in a readily accessible location with adequate working space. These requirements ensure safety and accessibility for both homeowners and qualified personnel. It is important to consult the latest edition of the NEC and any applicable local codes to ensure compliance. Local codes may have additional requirements or amendments to the NEC. Always consult with a qualified electrical contractor or inspector to ensure that the installation meets all applicable codes and standards. Failure to comply with these requirements can result in safety hazards, equipment damage, and code violations. Consider the scenario where the electrical service is being upgraded in an older home. The existing service panel is located in the basement, and the main disconnect is an old-style fuse disconnect that is mounted too high on the wall. To comply with current NEC requirements, the disconnect must be replaced with a modern circuit breaker type disconnect and relocated to a more accessible height. The new disconnect should be mounted so that the operating handle is within the specified height range. The old disconnect and wiring must be removed and replaced with new components. The new wiring must be properly sized and protected. The new disconnect must be properly grounded. Another consideration is the type of service entrance. There are two main types of service entrances: overhead and underground. An overhead service entrance involves conductors that run from the utility pole to the building. An underground service entrance involves conductors that run from an underground transformer to the building. The location of the main disconnect may be affected by the type of service entrance. For an overhead service entrance, the disconnect is typically located on the exterior of the building near the point where the conductors enter the building. For an underground service entrance, the disconnect may be located on the exterior of the building or inside the building near the point where the conductors enter the building. The NEC also addresses the issue of multiple disconnecting means. In some cases, it may be necessary to have more than one disconnecting means for a service. For example, if the service conductors supply multiple buildings on a property, each building must have its own disconnecting means. The NEC specifies the requirements for multiple disconnecting means, including the location, size, and labeling of the disconnects. Consider the situation where a homeowner is adding a detached garage to their property. The garage will be supplied with electricity from the main service panel in the house. The NEC requires that the garage have its own disconnecting means. This disconnect must be located in a readily accessible location either inside or outside the garage. The disconnect must be sized to handle the load of the garage. The disconnect must be properly grounded. The National Electrical Code is updated every 3 years. It is important to stay up to date on the latest requirements of the NEC to ensure that electrical installations are safe and compliant. The NEC is a complex document, and it is not always easy to understand. If you have any questions about the NEC, you should consult with a qualified electrical contractor or inspector. In addition to the NEC, there may be other codes and standards that apply to electrical installations. These may include local building codes, state electrical codes, and industry standards. It is important to be aware of all applicable codes and standards when designing and installing electrical systems. The NEC provides a comprehensive set of requirements for electrical installations. By following these requirements, you can help ensure that electrical systems are safe and reliable. The NEC is not a substitute for good engineering judgment. It is important to carefully consider the specific circumstances of each installation and to make decisions that are in the best interest of safety. The NEC is a living document that is constantly evolving to reflect new technologies and best practices. It is important to stay informed about the latest changes to the NEC. Electrical safety is a shared responsibility. Everyone involved in the design, installation, and maintenance of electrical systems has a role to play in ensuring safety. By working together, we can help prevent electrical accidents and injuries. Consider a scenario involving a mobile home. Mobile homes have unique electrical requirements that are addressed in Article 550 of the NEC. The main disconnect for a mobile home must be located either inside the mobile home or adjacent to it, and it must comply with the height requirements specified in NEC 230.70 AON. The disconnect must be readily accessible and clearly labelled. The NEC also addresses the issue of surge protection. Surge protection devices, SPDs, are designed to protect electrical equipment from voltage surges caused by lightning, power outages, and other events. The NEC requires that SPD be installed in certain locations, such as at the service entrance of a building. The SPD must be properly sized and installed. The NEC also addresses the issue of arc fault circuit interrupters (ASIs). ASIs are designed to detect arc faults, which are a common cause of electrical fires. The NEC requires that ASIs be installed in certain locations, such as in bedrooms and living rooms. The ASIs must be properly installed and tested. The NEC also addresses the issue of ground fault circuit interrupters, GFCIs. GFCIs are designed to protect people from electric shock. The NEC requires that GFCIs be installed in certain locations, such as in bathrooms, kitchens, and outdoor areas. The GFCIs must be properly installed and tested. Always remember to verify all steps with a licensed electrician to make sure it applies to the location. Electrical work is dangerous. If the work is not done properly, it could cause a safety issue.